I speak 12 languages. The silence crushed the room. 12 pairs of eyes fixed on that 12-year-old boy, tousled hair, worn shoes, who held the gaze of the most powerful man in Britain without blinking. Richard Pemberton let out a laugh, deep, harsh, full of contempt. Pardon? The laughter bounced off the windows that showed London from the 42nd floor. The executives exchanged knowing smiles. The boy's mother, Sarah Clark, clutched her cleaning uniform between trembling fingers. Sam Clark didn't lower his head. 12 languages, Mr. Pemberton, and I can prove it right now. Nobody believed him until he spoke. What he said in the next few seconds left them frozen. If this story has already touched your heart in this first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human goodness again. Comment from which country you're watching. The glass tower rose against London's sky like a dagger thrust into the city's heart. On the 47th floor, the air was thick with power and expensive cologne. Richard Pemberton dominated the oval table from the head. His Savile Row suit cost more than 3 families' annual salary. His hands, immaculate, had never known hard work. His grey eyes scanned faces like a predator evaluating prey. Around him, executives in silk ties awaited orders like disciplined soldiers. But there was an element out of place. A 12-year-old boy. Sam Clark wore a wrinkled white shirt and worn denim trousers. His scuffed shoes contrasted grotesquely with the Italian marble floor. His mother, Sarah, cleaned these floors every dawn. Her rough hands knew every centimeter of this cold perfection. Yet Sam didn't lower his gaze. His dark eyes looked directly at Richard Pemberton without blinking. Without fear, without the submission the magnate expected from everyone who breathed in his presence. "Do you know why you're here, lad?" Richard's voice was poisoned velvet. Sam nodded once, precise, calculated. "My mother needs this job. You said if I could translate your impossible document, she could stay." Richard smiled, a hungry shark's smile. "Exactly. And here's your impossible document." The paper he slid across the table was a symphony of dead and living languages. Medieval Latin mixed with ecclesiastical Russian, ancient Greek interwoven with classical Arabic, Mandarin Chinese dancing with ancient Hebrew. Europe's best translators had failed with that text. "Do you accept, lad?" Sarah Clark stepped forward, trembling. "Mr. Pemberton, please, he's just a child. Don't put him through this." Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. 30 years cleaning offices, 30 years being invisible, 30 years begging for scraps of dignity. "Mum." Sam's word was soft but final. He turned to her with eyes that seemed too old for such a young face. "It's all right, I accept." The executives exchanged glances. Contained smiles bloomed on their faces like oil stains. The humiliation would be epic. The show, unforgettable. Richard leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment like aged wine. "Perfect, but let's make this interesting." His Swiss watch gleamed under the cold lights as he checked the time. "You have exactly 10 minutes. If you fail even on one line, your mother gets sacked, and I'll make sure no company in London ever hires her again." The marble floor seemed colder, the air heavier. Sarah closed her eyes, holding back tears she couldn't afford to shed. But Sam smiled, a small, mysterious smile. "I accept, but I have one condition." Richard raised an eyebrow, amused by the boy's audacity. "A condition? You're not in a position to set conditions, you little git." "If I succeed," said Sam with a voice clear as mountain water, "you also have to fulfill something." The silence thickened. The executives stopped smiling. There was something in that boy's eyes, something Richard couldn't decipher. Sam requested just one condition before starting, and that condition would change everything. Sam took the document in his small hands. The paper trembled slightly, not from his nerves, but from the air conditioning. His eyes moved from left to right, top to bottom, like a human scanner processing impossible information. "I'll start with the medieval Latin." His voice was clear, without hesitation. "Hic documentum continet errorem temporis. Anno Domini MCC Cixi scriptum dicitur, sed Rex Johannes non regnabat post annum MCC exi." The executives looked at each other. None understood Latin, but Richard did. His smile faded a centimeter, barely perceptible, but Sam noticed. "There's a date error in the document," Sam translated into English. "It says it was written in 1214, but King John didn't reign after 1216. The HR director whispered something in his assistant's ear. His cheeks had turned red. Europe's best translators had missed that detail. "I'll continue with ecclesiastical Russian." Sam didn't wait for permission. His voice changed register, adopting the guttural and melodic sounds of Old Slavic. "Во имя Отца и Сына и Святаго Духа. Сей текст свидетельствует о договоре между купцами." The words flowed like golden honey, perfect, impossible coming from a council estate boy. Richard leaned forward, his right hand closed into a fist on the table. "It says this text witnesses a contract between merchants," Sam translated, "but it uses a religious formula that was only used in monastic manuscripts from the 11th century. The boy wasn't just translating. He was correcting errors that scholars with doctorates hadn't detected. Sarah placed a hand on her chest. Her heart was beating so hard she feared everyone could hear it. The executives had stopped smiling completely. "But there's something more," Sam murmured, bringing the paper to the window. The evening light filtered through the document's fibers. There was a line, invisible to the naked eye. The evening's sidelight revealed hidden secrets in the paper. Sam turned the document 45 degrees. His eyes narrowed, concentrated like an archaeologist deciphering hieroglyphs. Here's text in ancient Greek, written with invisible ink that only reveals itself with indirect light. His voice changed again. Hellenic sounds sprang from his throat like water from a pure spring. "O logos sarx egeneto και σκήνος εν ενημήν, αλλά τούτο ουκ έσtin αλήθεια." Richard went pale. "What? What does it say?" stammered the finance director. "It starts quoting the Gospel of John," Sam translated without taking his eyes off the document. "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But this is not truth." A glacial cold ran through the room. It wasn't air conditioning. It was something much deeper. Sam continued, his voice now charged with an authority that didn't correspond to his age. "Then there's a section in classical Arabic. في الظلام نجد النور وفي الضعف نجد القوة. الرجل القوي لا يفهم هذا." Sarah didn't understand Arabic, but tears began rolling down her cheeks. There was something in the way her son spoke that broke her heart and filled her with pride simultaneously. "In darkness we find light, and in weakness we find strength. The powerful man doesn't understand this." The executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. The air had become heavy, charged with electricity before a storm. "A Mandarin Chinese part follows," Sam murmured, his small index finger tracing characters invisible to others. "Qiangzhe jian ta ruozhe, tan ruozhe de xinzhong changzhao zhenzheng de baochang." The strong trample the weak, but in the hearts of the weak lies the true treasure. Richard had stood from his chair without realizing. His hands trembled imperceptibly. How is it possible you know?" But Sam wasn't finished. "There's more. A section in ancient Hebrew that I think you'll especially want to hear, Mr. Pemberton." The words weighed like stones falling into deep water. The real message remained hidden. Sam brought the document to the desk lamp. The yellowish light pierced through the paper like X-rays revealing hidden bones. And then the letters appeared, golden, brilliant, impossible. Written in ancient Hebrew, the words danced before everyone's eyes like sacred flames. "Aim yagia laish hazak, vod yakvol lishtanvot." Sam's voice broke slightly, Not from nervousness, from emotion. Richard Pemberton collapsed into his chair as if he'd received a punch to the stomach, because he knew those words. If it reaches a powerful man, he can still change. Sarah brought both hands to her face. She didn't understand how, but she knew she was witnessing something sacred, something that would change their lives forever. The executives watched the scene without fully understanding, but feeling the weight of something monumental unfolding before their eyes. Richard murmured something so quietly it was barely heard, "My grandfather." His grey eyes, always hard as steel, filled with something nobody had ever seen. Vulnerability, recognition, remorse. "Your grandfather wrote this document, didn't he?" Sam asked gently. "He was a good man who lost his fortune helping refugees during the war, and before dying he wrote these words, hoping they would someday reach you." Richard's right hand trembled on the marble table. How can you know that?" Sam folded the document with reverent care. "Because there's one last part, in Yiddish, the language your grandfather spoke with your grandmother before the world went mad." A tear rolled down Richard Pemberton's cheek. Just one. But in 30 years of being a ruthless magnate, it was the first. "De größte Rekit eis dikabet was man getes of ander." The greatest wealth is the dignity you give to others. The silence was so profound you could hear each person's heartbeat in the room. Sam didn't want money, he wanted something else. Richard wiped the tear with the back of his hand as if it were poison. "What? What do you want?" His voice was hoarse, vulnerable. Sam straightened up, small in stature, giant in presence. "3 things." The executives leaned forward, expecting to hear requests for money, scholarships for him, family favors. The things everyone asked for when they had the chance. "First," said Sam with a voice clear as crystal, "I want you to apologize to my mother, in public, on your knees, for all the years you've treated her as if she were invisible." Sarah stifled a gasp. "Sam, no." "Second," the boy continued unfazed, "I want you to create a scholarship program. Not for children like me who already know things. For children who don't know they can learn. For invisible children." Richard looked at him with a mixture of astonishment and terror. It was like standing before a mirror that showed not who he was, but who he could have been. "And third," Sam walked until he was a meter away from the most powerful man in London. "I want you to learn a language, but not with expensive tutors. With ordinary people. With immigrants who clean offices. With refugees who sell newspapers. With people you've never seen, though they surround you every day." The air had thickened like honey. "I want you to learn what it means not to know, what it means to need help, what it means to be vulnerable." The executives exchanged incredulous glances. Was a 12-year-old boy dictating conditions to the richest man in Britain? Richard closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, something had changed in them, something deep and permanent. "If I accept your conditions," he murmured, "will you continue translating?" Sam smiled. A smile so pure it illuminated the entire room. "If you accept, I continue. If not, I finish here." Richard Pemberton slowly rose from his leather throne. His legs trembled slightly as he took the first steps. Not from physical weakness, but from the weight of 30 years of arrogance crumbling from his shoulders. He walked towards Sarah Clark. She instinctively stepped back, her rough hands clutching her uniform like a lifeline. "Mr. Pemberton, it's not necessary, Yes, it is." His voice was different, raspy, as if he was speaking through decades of collapsing pride. He stopped in front of her. The executives held their breath. In 30 years working for Richard Pemberton, they had never seen him like this. Vulnerable, human. Slowly, very slowly, Richard bent his knees. The sound of his Italian wool trousers brushing the cold marble was like paper crinkling. His handmade shoes touched the floor Sarah had cleaned thousands of times. "Sarah Clark," he murmured, his head bowed down, "forgive me. She brought her hands to her face, tears flowing freely now. For 15 years you've cleaned my offices. You've made the mess of my life invisible. You've worked while I slept. You've bled while I counted profits. And I never knew your name. His voice cracked like dry wood. I never saw your face. I never acknowledged your existence. I treated you like a ghost who picked up my rubbish. Sarah was sobbing now, 30 years of humiliation and exhaustion pouring out like a broken dam. Forgive me for stealing your dignity. Forgive me for making your son have to be the man I should have been. Richard looked up at her. His grey eyes were red, brilliant. Do you forgive me? Sarah extended her rough hand, weathered by decades of bleach and detergent, and gently touched the cheek of the most powerful man in London. I forgive you, she whispered. The silence that followed was sacred. The executives watched the scene, not knowing where to look. Some discreetly wiped their own tears. Richard slowly stood up, like a man who had just been born. But that wouldn't be the last surrender he'd make that day. Richard returned to his desk with different steps. His movements had lost their predatory arrogance. Now he walked like someone carrying an invisible but necessary weight. He opened the top drawer and extracted a golden phone. His fingers dialed a number he knew by heart. Charles, it's Richard. Cancel the Andalusia project. The voice on the other end was hysterical squawking that could be heard even from afar. Yes, I know we're losing 400 million. Cancel it. He hung up. He dialed another number. Elena, the contract with the Brazilian construction company, yes, the condominium one, include a new clause, fair wages for all workers and materials that don't pollute the river. More screaming from the other side. If they don't agree, let them find another partner. He hung up. Sam watched him from his chair, Sarah beside him with a protective hand on his shoulder. Next, Richard murmured, dialing a third number. Robert, the mining project in Africa, suspended until we guarantee local communities receive 60% of the profits. His voice was firm now, each word like a stone thrown into the lake of his old life, creating ripples that would extend for years. The executives watched the scene with growing horror. Each call represented millions of pounds, evaporating, decades of planning dissolving like sugar in rain. Mr. Pemberton, the finance director stammered, You're destroying everything we've built. Richard looked at him with eyes that seemed to see for the first time. No, Frederick, I'm building something for the first time. He dialed a fourth number. Maria, I want you to prepare a legal document. We're going to create a foundation, the Sam Clark Foundation for Invisible Children. Initial endowment, £500 million. Sarah collapsed into her chair. 500 million. More money than she had dreamed of seeing in 100 lifetimes. His wealthy friends wouldn't understand. A week later, the London Businessmen's Club was a temple of black marble and 50-year-old whiskey. There, the gods of money met every Friday to decide the fate of millions of nameless lives. Richard pushed through the oak doors, as he had for 15 years. But this time conversations stopped. The faces that had always greeted him with voracious smiles now looked at him with Arctic coldness. Richard, murmured Edward Vasquez from his leather armchair. We've been talking. The air smelled of betrayal wrapped in expensive cologne. Sit down. But when Richard approached his usual chair, Robert Sanchez didn't move to make room. Your change of business direction has caused ripples, old friend. The word friend sounded like poison in honey. The Andalusia project was vital for all of us. The Brazilian contract guaranteed us position in South America, and the African mine was theft. Richard interrupted with a calm voice. What we called business was theft disguised as legality. The laughter that erupted was sharp as knives. Theft? Charles Montenegro stood up, his £3,000 suit trembling with indignation. Is feeding our families theft? Is generating employment theft? Employment? Richard looked at them one by one. Do you call employment paying starvation wages while we buy yachts? The silence that followed was glacial. Edward slowly stood up. I think you need time to reflect, Richard. Time away from strange influences. All eyes fell on him like interrogation spotlights. From today, you're no longer welcome in this club. The words hit like hammer blows. 15 years of belonging to Britain's most exclusive circle, evaporating like smoke. Richard stood up. His shoulders no longer carried the weight of others' approval. Thank you, he murmured, for setting me free. He walked toward the door under a silent rain of contempt. They were waiting for him at the library, his first class as a student. The British Library smelled of old books and archived dreams. Richard entered for the first time not as a millionaire donor, but as a student. His hands, accustomed to holding million-pound contracts, trembled slightly as he opened a cheap notebook. Mr. Pemberton. The voice surprised him. An elderly woman, with grey hair and gnarled hands, looked at him with gentle curiosity. I'm Grace Chen. You requested basic Mandarin lessons. Richard nodded, feeling strangely small. But I must warn you, Grace continued with a smile that wrinkled her eyes. I'm not a university professor. I'm an immigrant. I arrived from Beijing 30 years ago without knowing a single word of English. Perfect, Richard murmured. I need to learn from someone who understands what it is to know nothing. For 2 hours, Grace guided him through the basic sounds of Mandarin. Richard, accustomed to dominating, found himself stammering like a child. Wo bu zhidao. I don't know. Those words, which he had never uttered in business, became the most important in his vocabulary. At the end of the class, Grace packed her worn books. May I ask you something? Richard said timidly. Of course. Why do you agree to teach me? I'm the type of person who probably ignored you for years. Grace looked at him with eyes that had seen too much world. My son worked cleaning offices at night to pay for my English classes. I could never thank him. Maybe by teaching you, I'm giving something back to the universe. 3 days later, Richard was in a neighborhood cafe, learning Arabic with Omar Hassan, a Syrian refugee who sold newspapers in the underground. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome, Richard repeated, his pronunciation clumsy but sincere. Omar laughed fondly each time Richard massacred the guttural consonants. In Arabic, Omar explained while serving mint tea, every word has a 3-letter root, like construction. First you lay foundations, then walls, then roof. Like learning to be human, Richard murmured. A week later in Hyde Park, an elderly indigenous woman called Elder Mary Okafor taught him Igbo. Kuo. Speak, she repeated with infinite patience. But truly speaking means listening first. Her hands, rough as tree bark, drew symbols in the earth while explaining concepts that had no direct translation into English. Omume, reciprocity, giving and receiving in balance. Your English has thank you, but Igbo has omume, very different. Richard wrote each word in his notebook as if it were gold. What does it mean to be rich in Igbo? He asked one afternoon. Elder Mary smiled, her eyes shining with millennial wisdom. Ogaranya means rich, but it comes from Ogar, which means master, and Anya, eye. Rich is one who has the eye to see truly, not one who has much. What began at a table would become a movement. 6 months later, the Sam Clark Foundation for Invisible Children had transformed an abandoned building in the heart of London into something that seemed like a daily miracle. The classrooms buzzed with voices in dozens of languages. In Classroom 3, Grace Chen taught Mandarin to a group of Bengali children who had never left Tower Hamlets. Their infant voices repeated tones that sounded like music. Ni hao, hello, hello. In classroom 7, Omar had set up a small tea shop where he taught Arabic while children learned to prepare baklava. The aroma of honey and pistachios filled the corridors. Shukran, shukran. Thank you, thank you. Sarah Clark, who now directed the family coordination program, watched parents who worked dawn shifts become teachers in the afternoons. Michael, who cleaned buildings, taught Portuguese. Carmen, who waited tables, taught French she'd learned working in Paris. Anthony, who repaired bicycles, taught Italian with authentic Neapolitan accent. But the most special classroom was number 12. There, Richard Pemberton, former property magnate, sat in a circle with 8 children from different council estates, teaching them the only thing he truly mastered, numbers. But not business mathematics, life mathematics. If your mum earns $800 a month, he explained with infinite patience, and rent costs $600, how much does she have left for food? The 8-year-old girl counted on her fingers. 200, Uncle Richard. Exactly, Sophie. And if she has to buy medicine for Grandma for 50, 150, shouted a boy from behind. Perfect, Ryan. And do you know what that means? The infant eyes looked at him with pure curiosity. It means your mum is a magician, because she feeds the whole family with $150 a month. Laughter filled the classroom like little silver bells. In the corridors, handmade posters decorated the walls. Speaking languages is having superpowers, said one in childish handwriting. My grandmother speaks 3 languages and is the wisest person in the world, proclaimed another. But the poster that made Richard proudest hung by the main door. It was a drawing of Sam, made by a 6-year-old girl. Below, in crooked but firm letters, she had written, Sam taught us that being different is being special. In the afternoons, when classes ended, something magical happened. The children didn't immediately go home. They stayed in the corridors, practicing with each other. Nina, 10 years old, taught basic French to Carlos, 8. Ahmed shared Arabic words with Maria. Sophie tried pronouncing Chinese characters she'd copied from memory. Parents waited in the courtyard, but not in a hurry. They exchanged recipes, advice about jobs, information about bureaucratic procedures. A community had formed that transcended languages and nationalities. One Friday afternoon, while Richard helped clean the classrooms, Sarah approached him. Do you know what Sam told me yesterday? She asked with shining eyes. What? That you no longer speak like a rich person, that you speak like a person. Richard smiled, his hands soaping the desks the children had used. Your son gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. What? My soul. News began arriving. Other cities wanted to replicate the model. Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, even from Ireland and Wales delegations came to study the foundation of invisible children. But true success was measured in small moments, like when Omar could read an official letter without help for the first time, like when Grace received a postcard from her grandson written in perfect Mandarin, like when Elder Mary saw her words in Igbo engraved on an official foundation plaque. Like when Sarah stopped cleaning offices to become director of a program that changed lives. And like when Richard realized that for the first time in 30 years, he woke up each morning wanting to live. And the day of recognition arrived. A year later, the Royal Festival Hall gleamed under golden spotlights. On stage, a giant banner proclaimed, First Graduation, Sam Clark Foundation for Invisible Children. 500 children filled the red seats, dressed in their finest clothes. Their families packed the galleries, phone cameras held high, tears of pride flowing freely. In the front row, Sam Clark, now 13, wore a simple but impeccable suit. Beside him, Sarah wore a blue dress that Richard had given her, not as boss, but as family. Richard, from backstage, observed through a gap in the curtain. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from pure emotion. On stage, a long table held handmade certificates. Each child would receive recognition for mastering at least 3 basic languages. but more importantly, for teaching that shared knowledge multiplies. The event director, a former ambassador, took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate something unique in Britain. 500 children who arrived not knowing they were special and discovered they carried treasures in their minds. The applause was deafening. But before the ceremony, we want to hear from the one who inspired all this, Sam Clark. Sam stood with the quiet grace that characterized him. He walked toward the microphone unhurriedly, as if it were the most natural place in the world. "Good evening." His amplified voice filled the auditorium like golden honey. "A year ago I entered an office to save my mum's job. I thought I was going to translate a document. I didn't know I was going to translate a life." Sarah brought her handkerchief to her eyes. "Here are children who speak Arabic and English, others who master Chinese and French, some who mix Igbo with Italian, but we all learned the most difficult language." He paused, his eyes scanning the expectant faces. "The language that teaches us that being different isn't being less. That coming from a council estate doesn't mean having a poor brain. That cleaning floors at night doesn't prevent reaching stars by day." Applause interrupted, but Sam gently raised his hand. "And we learned there are people who seem very strong on the outside, but inside they're lost. And sometimes invisible children are the only ones who can help them find themselves." Richard, from backstage, felt tears flowing freely down his cheeks. "That's why today we're not graduating 500 children who learned languages. We're graduating 500 teachers who will show the world that true wealth is shared dignity." The auditorium exploded in an ovation that lasted 5 minutes. When it finally calmed, Sam smiled. "Now I want someone who also graduated this year to come on stage. Someone who learned it's never too late to speak a new language. The language of humility." Richard Pemberton. The former magnate emerged from backstage with unsteady steps. The audience, who knew the story, received him with warm but respectful applause. He stood next to Sam, the richest man in London, beside the boy who had given him back his life. "Thank you," he murmured into the microphone, "for teaching me that speaking 12 languages is useless if you don't know how to speak to the heart." His eyes found Sarah's in the front row. "And thank you for showing me that real teachers wear uniforms, not expensive suits." The final ovation lasted 10 minutes. This is just the beginning. 5 years later. London streets had changed, not architecturally but spiritually. On the Underground, it wasn't rare to hear children practicing languages with adults of different nationalities. In parks, multi-ethnic groups met on Sundays to exchange lessons and typical food. The Invisible Children Network had spread throughout Britain, then Europe, finally the world. But on a corner of the neighborhood where it all began, next to a state school that smelled of chalk and dreams, Sam Clark, now 18, knelt beside a 7-year-old boy who was crying silently. "What's your name?" Sam asked with the same gentle voice that had disarmed a magnate. "Kevin," the little one sobbed. "But nobody understands me. I speak funny." Sam smiled. In his backpack he carried notebooks, pencils, and most importantly, the infinite patience he'd learned from his mother. "You know what, Kevin? Speaking funny is speaking special. Where are you from?" "From Romania. But here they say I'm stupid because I mix words." Sam took out a new notebook and handed it to the boy. "Let's write your first word in English. But first, teach me a word in Romanian. Something beautiful." Kevin's eyes lit up for the first time. "Speranța. It means hope." "Perfect. Now write it here in your notebook. That's going to be your first magic word." Kevin's small hands traced trembling letters on the white paper. In the distance, Richard watched the scene from his new job as Educational Programs Coordinator. Sarah was beside him, now National Director of the network. "Do you know what I see?" Richard murmured. "What?" "The future. A child who feels invisible today will be the one who illuminates others tomorrow. Sarah smiled, her hands no longer rough from bleach, but soft from daily contact with books and hope. "My son speaks 15 languages now," she murmured with infinite pride. "Which did he learn last?" Sarah looked toward where Sam was helping Kevin write. Unconditional love. In the notebook next to Speranza, Kevin had written his first word in English. Friend. Sam closed the notebook and hugged him. "We'll come back tomorrow, yeah? There are many words waiting for us." Kevin nodded, no longer crying. As they walked together toward the school exit, Sam remembered his grandfather's words, which his mother had whispered to him one night. "The world is full of languages, but the most important isn't learned from books." "Which one is it, Grandpa?" he had asked as a child. "The language that unites hearts, my boy. That one is learned with the soul." Sam spoke 15 languages, but the most difficult was called dignity. What would you have done in Sam's place, in Richard's place? Sometimes the most powerful people need someone invisible to remind them who they can truly be. Subscribe for more stories that restore faith in humanity, because we all carry a Sam inside, waiting for the moment to shine. And remember, you too speak languages you didn't know you knew, the language of kindness, the language of second chances, the language that can change a life with just a smile. Comment, what's the most difficult language you've had to learn in your life?